Hey everyone, thanks for joining us tonight. Welcome to the breakout session. Like Ed said, my name's Grace and I live in Mingo County, West Virginia. And tonight I'm actually joining y'all from Richmond, Virginia. I saw someone else is in Richmond, so that's great. This session is Moving Mountains, today's fight towards social justice and environmental justice in Appalachia.
Before we begin our sessions, we always want to just begin with a reminder to each other that we're all here to learn, that sometimes we're encountering new information, new concepts, new ideas for the first time. So we ask that we enter into a spirit of openness, of respectfulness, and a recognition that we are all learners here. But we also want to be thoughtful with the comments that we make, the words that we share, and the words that we choose to use. Even as we attempt to learn and even as we expose ourselves to new concepts, that we do so in a way that's respectful, that we don't say anything that is intentionally hurtful or demeaning to somebody else. And so what we're going to ask is that if everybody can just give a thumbs up to consent to those ground rules. That's great. All right. So thanks to everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Grace.
Thanks, Ed. So this evening, we're going to hear from 4 activists whose work is inspired by the Gospels and alive in our mountains today. Robin and Vincent are joining us from Huntington and Wheeling, West Virginia, respectively. Linda is joining us from Northeast Tennessee, or what we could call Atomic Appalachia. And Joan is joining us from Floyd County, Virginia. We invite everyone to, if you're interested as we speak throughout this talk, if you would like to share your email address in the chat, we'll collect those if you are interested in keeping in contact and connecting with any of these activists more. And that can be at any point. If you hear something, you say, oh, now I know I want to hear more about that. So at any point, you're welcome to share your email. And we'll save those and get them to our presenters. And I'll also be sharing the panelists' emails as they begin speaking. So if you hear something that they're saying that you'd like, you'll have their contact as well. Additionally, as we're listening and learning, if you have any questions that come to mind, feel free to go ahead and type them in the chat. And we'll keep an eye on those as they come in. So at the end, we can have a discussion if you have any questions for them, and we don't have to try and remember them the whole time. So yeah, we hope you'll enjoy the session and stick around at the end to hear some more questions and comments. So now I'm going to turn it over to Joan Wages, and she will get us started.
Hi, good evening, everyone. And thank you, Grace, for the introduction and for your efforts in support in bringing this panel and this workshop together. I'd like to start by acknowledging that the land on which I currently dwell is the seized territory of the Tutelos, Saponi, and Monacan peoples. I've been living in the mountains and valleys of what is called now Southwest Virginia for about 18 years. And for the next 10 minutes, I'd like to just share a little bit from my activism efforts in this area and in other places as well. And this is all about moving the mountains of injustice, right? That's our theme here. Or what Martin Luther King Jr. called the giant triplets of racism, militarism, and capitalism, which he also called economic exploitation. As many of us are painfully aware, these triplets have brought us to the brink in terms of facing the real possibility of the end of life as we know it on this planet. But there is hope in this activism work, and I have experienced it. And I'm going to share a little bit about that. But I want to say that Reverend William Barber recently pointed out that we can look to the prophet Amos for hope. He says that these mountains of injustice can be moved. He quotes Amos and says, what we need are 3 things: the real truth, and as we know, that comes from people in the margins. We also need real lamentation. We need crying and wailing in the streets, he says. And we need to let justice roll down. like waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream. He says, when a rushing stream comes through, it can restructure everything. And many of us have witnessed that. He says, nothing remains the same. So we can move these mountains of injustice, towards justice. So a little bit about my story, a few stories from my activism. I've lost my place. So I'll just start in 2009. In 2009, we were living here in Floyd County, Virginia, and we started to realize the bigger picture of injustice that pervades our world, the giant triplets of Martin Luther King that he gives voice to. We started participating in Catholic worker movement retreats. We would go to the Feast of the Holy Innocents retreats every year in Washington, D.C., and witness with that group. And I just wanted to share a few things that I learned during those years. This was a family thing. So we would pack up the kids who were, I think when we started going, they were like 8 and 10. And they were a little skeptical about how this was gonna work. And they were, when I look back at pictures of them, I see them in the street and their heads are down, like they're kind of afraid of what's going on. So it was I think a good experience for all of us, and they look back on it, and they almost every time we get together at these innocence retreats, they comment about how they what they've gleaned from it over the years. So, but to say a few things about my involvement in those retreats, what I learned is that we use this process of prayer and reflection, and then we would do an action, and then we would reflect again. So people would say reflection, action, reflection was our process. So we might do a Bible reading, and then we would each reflect on, okay, what is this saying to us at this time right now with what is going on in the world? And we would be in a circle, and we would share what we thought the reading was speaking to us about what's going on today. And then we would, so we were trying to see what the truth was, right, for each of us, and how that was playing out in the world, and what the injustices were that were brought up by this reading. And then we would plan an action based on that. We would pick a site, plan an action to go out and do in a public way. And then we would do the action, and then we would come back and we would reflect again on how it went. So that was kind of a process that I hadn't seen before and hadn't experienced before, and I've just really, I think it helps me stick with the work, because it is a process, and it does, it keeps us faith rooted, and it's also done in community with people who don't always know each other when we first gather. There's always new people there, but we always get to know each other, and we take time to get to know each other. And I think the reflective circles help us to understand where people are coming from. So that's one point I wanted to share. And then a second point is when we would go out and do the actions, we would follow kind of what Reverend Barber's saying about what Amos says. Basically, we would start out sharing the truth about the injustice that's happening at that particular site. And we would often bring in voices from people in the margins to do that. Maybe not that particular person in person, but stories that people have written or shared, quotes from people, poems, all those kinds of things, to bring it into the real truth. And then we would do some lament, maybe a song, express sorrow, express all different emotions related to what was happening to the people that were most affected. And then the third piece was always to bring people into hope of, it doesn't have to be this way. And yes, you might be sitting there doing your job at the Pentagon, but you don't have to do that job at the Pentagon. we would invite people to join us and imagine a different world. And imagine if we could, change what the Pentagon does into something totally different and something life-giving. So those were kind of the three things that I think Amos points out that we would also bring into our activism there. The other thing I wanted to just share a little bit about my work in when we lived in Roanoke in the city. I got involved in this NAACP, and then a young man, 18-year-old high school student, was shot in the street by police. And quickly after that, his brother formed a group called Justice for Keontae. And I got involved in that. And it ended up being a biracial, multi-faith coalition that did its work in concert with the NAACP. So we kept our separate groups, and some of us were involved in both, but we tried to work in concert. And I don't think we didn't make much progress in getting the truth out because the police still won't release the extra information that we've been asking for. However, it was probably the first time in that city of Roanoke where this sort of thing came together. And so I gather hope from that. I also felt like I learned more about the ways that I participate in the racist system that we have than I ever would have if I hadn't been involved. I never would have understood how I participate in it. And I've realized that most of my participation was silence, was in my silences. And so that that kind of spurred me on to agitate within my own congregation, my Unitarian Universalist congregation, to agitate for looking more closely at who we are and what we're called to do and how we participate in it. And at first, of course, it wasn't really, I wasn't getting any positive feedback, but once I turned my focus to, okay, we have groups of people of color within our faith who are asking specifically for us to do things differently. And I started putting those things, as CCA would say, right? The spirit of CCA was with me, pointing out that people of color in our congregations and in our faith are asking us to do things differently and to look at ourselves differently. Once I started doing that, things started flowing. And so I think that was really key. So I wanted to bring that up, and I'm grateful to CCA for also teaching me that. Yeah, I think that's the main points that I wanted to make. And I would just say that it's the first step for a person of privilege like me to seeing the truth clearly and really understanding things is to listen to those people who are experiencing it. And if I don't take that step, I cannot lament. I cannot see my own involvement and really look internally at who I am and what I need to do. So as I said, that's the first step, and then it all kind of flows from there. And I thank you for your listening.
Awesome. Thank you, Joan. We're going to turn it over now to Robin.
Hi, everybody. My name is Robin Blakeman, and I am an ordained Presbyterian minister with a validated ministry in the West Virginia Presbytery, working on environmental education and ecological justice issues in this state and region. I work outside the brick and mortar bounds of a church most of the time, and I am a full-time project coordinator for the Ohio Valley Environmental Coalition, a grassroots environmental advocacy and organizing group that has been in existence for more than 30 years. I'm also on the steering committee of West Virginia Interfaith Power and Light, an organization that I helped found about 4 years ago. It has been a long road to get to this point in my career, including 4 years of seminary education at Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary. And yet, I felt God's hand leading me through it all. From the time I was a counselor, a camp counselor, at a summer church camp in the hills of Summers County, West Virginia, near Hinton, to my return to West Virginia in 2007. At that particular point in time, I remember tears filling my eyes when I crossed the Ohio River on my way back to the Huntington area where I grew up. There was a song on the radio at that time, and I remember one line that was probably most responsible for those tears and for my feeling of call back home. The line was, "West Virginia chose me, sure as my own mother knows me." Some of you may know that song. I believe it's by Colleen Anderson. Soon after moving back to my home state, I've started volunteering for OVEC, the organization I now work for, and led a prayer vigil on Cayford Mountain, one of the primary places where average people can go to view the devastation caused by mountaintop removal coal mining. That's the wrong type of moving mountains, folks. About a year after leading that vigil and becoming an OVEC volunteer, I was offered a job, and here I am to this day. These days, OVEC's focus has shifted more to the Ohio River Valley. This is because we are aware of a massive master plan that the petrochemical and oil and gas industry has to develop a large petrochemical processing and liquefied gas byproduct storage and transport hub in our region. I'm responsible for making you watch a video tonight. This video that I've chosen for you is a short one, 5 minutes long, but it shows you the potential dangers of this project and the dangers already present in the established petrochemical hub in the Gulf Coast area. You might have heard of this hub. Its nickname is Cancer Alley. So let's all watch this video together, and afterwards I just have some short concluding comments. I think 30 seconds is up, so I'll just say that, I hope that you feel as inspired in some aspect of your life to engage in a cause as I feel in this one. I'm one of the 5 million people who depend on tap water from the Ohio River. And that, and my whole immediate family does too. And that motivates me to work on this issue like no other that I've ever faced. And I just really hope that it is inspirational for all of you to engage in something from your heart. I know the next speaker, Vincent, has a personal angle on one part of the Appalachian Storage Hub, and that's the PTTG, the proposed PTTG cracker plant, which hasn't been built yet and we hope won't be built.
That's right.
We do have a Faith Leaders Letter campaign going on that, and I'm going to put a link to that in the chat as well. And there's another event on October 14th that if you're interested in finding out more about this Faith Leaders Letter campaign and the PTTG cracker plan, I would invite you to join. So take it away, Vincent.
Thanks, Robin. And I don't know if it needs to be said here at CCA, but we're all faith leaders and encouraged to share and sign and send that letter. So definitely Robin's put in a lot of great work on that, and it's getting a lot of traction. As Robin and Grace and anyone else said, I'm Vincent. I'm coming to you from Charleston tonight, but I live in Wheeling. I'm from Morgantown, West Virginia. And I'm going to talk to you here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see some slides that I put up, and I think they'll just be pretty quick. Can I get a thumbs up from anyone if we can see that? Okay. As Robin said, we work actually in large part together. OVEC and Concerned Ohio River Residents is the local group that sprung up in the Northern Panhandle, right around Wheeling, Bridgeport, Ohio, down to Moundsville. And yeah, we work in environmental advocacy. They're in response to need. I think a lot of the same way that Joan was speaking about her activism, recognizing the need really spurred our group forward. So we work in this area, and as Robin mentioned, we work to kind of preserve our environment from petrochemicals. Specifically, this plastics plant, they call it an ethane cracker plant. It makes plastic. We can call it what it is. But then also fracking, the oil and gas industry, and like Robin said, the storage hub. I always think it's important to point out, they're not storing this stuff in tanks. They kind of say storage hub, and it makes it sound like they're going to put them in nice tanks. They're going to put them in caves right in the Ohio River. And then also waste. So we'll see a little bit about that. But I wanted to take the opportunity, because this is the Catholic Committee of Appalachia, and it's kind of a neat opportunity because unlike Robin, I'm not an ordained minister, and I don't always advocate in the language of my spirituality, I guess is a way to say it. Is very much a part of my advocacy, but we apply to a lot of secular news outlets, and we speak in this language. So this is a real opportunity for me to kind of talk about my background. So I'm going to do that for a second. I'm kind of framing my story here in terms of this quote. It's a cardinal, I don't know his name. He works for Pope Francis in the Vatican. And right at the beginning of COVID, he put out this statement, or an article that I saw. He said, "It's time to put away the theology books for now. There's a gospel in the making on the streets." And as soon as that came out, I saw it pretty quickly, and that really spoke to me because of the rest of my little path here that we can get into. I was blessed for Morgantown and the St. Francis Central Catholic School there to be able to go on to undergrad and get Jesuit educated. And then I went to grad school in Pittsburgh and got my PhD in science. And that was a tremendous opportunity. Certainly informs some of the work that I do. We saw in Robin's video how this chemistry, it's being used, science can be used for good, and it can be used to do harm. So that's a blessing to have that background as part of this. After grad school, in the top right, we see I was moved, like Robin, to explore a seminary and join the clergy, and that was a real hope. I came back to West Virginia for the Diocese of Wheeling-Charleston, and like a lot of people in the Diocese of Wheeling-Charleston, experienced harm and disappointment in my church, and processing that and acknowledging it, and then continuing on was a big part of my formation. And I'm so pleased at my next moves here, because I came back to West Virginia. I came back to Wheeling, community I'd only spent some time with. And down on the bottom right, I came in with an urban farming group. We have a lot of urban or spiritual farms in West Virginia. I think I saw Naz Farm on the call, Bethlehem Farm. It's a tremendous thing. The Appalachian Catholic Worker House. I live at a Catholic Worker House in Wheeling, the House of Hagar. It's beautiful. I couldn't have hoped for a better transition out of seminary and into this gospel in the making on the streets than the House of Hagar in Wheeling, West Virginia. And if we see in the bottom right, this is not all of what I spend my days with, but there is an opportunity for advocacy, for just trying to do our part to do good in Wheeling. So this was an opportunity that the city was bulldozing homeless camps. Those are our friends. When they came in, when the second time they put up notices, they came to us and we went to them and said, what can we do? And this was a little prayerful vigil we tried to have. But like Joan was saying there, yeah, it's a response to need. And for me, an opportunity to use these gifts and talents and interests that God's given me, not as I planned, as you might see from this windy trajectory, but as the need has presented itself. And I want to just finish. This is my last little slide. The need here in Appalachia, it's not new. As Robin pointed out, OVEC has been doing tremendous work for the past 30 years, and we know the work has continued before that. We know names like Mother Jones, and it's been tremendous for me to see the work that other people have done and then to be part of it, to continue it. For me to come back from seminary, we were supposed to be learning all these things, and only then really plug into the Catholic Committee of Appalachia. I'm wearing my Be the Church You Want to See in the World shirt, to only then connect with that message, and to start to use my voice as someone who's blessed to have this background and these abilities to raise a voice that people might listen to in a way that Joan talked about not everyone is listened to. That is a beautiful thing. And so much of what I see in my work in environmentalism is not new. It's continuing, and as Christ says, we're making all things new. But look, Francis is coming out with his environmental encyclicals, right? Laudato Si, Carita Amazonia. But how much of those encyclicals are the very language of the pastorals that we know and love? How often have I found myself saying since I moved back, yeah, this land is home to me, and I am home in this whole ecosystem, this web of life. It's beautiful. So I think that's just really where I want to add is that, or where I want to end rather, is that there's so much work to do, and it can seem so daunting, but at the same time, there's so much hope. And for me as a young person, so much of that hope comes from the work that other people have done before me, to be able to have partners in this petrochemical efforts like OVEC and Robin, to have prophetic voices that have come before me, like the Catholic Committee of Appalachia, and to have support structures like Catholic Workers. It's just enough to keep going and to keep living that gospel on the street, just as I can. So I think that's about my time, and I am really excited to pass it over to Linda to finish things out for our panel. Oh, I need to stop sharing my screen.
Awesome. Thank you, Vincent.
There.
Next, we have Linda.
Well, I am really happy to be with all of you, and you might hear echoes in my talk of what Joan and Robin and Vincent have said, because we are one people, one Appalachia, and one, as our friends out west also call, a sacrifice zone. So we're seeing a truncated slide here. Anyway, we're going to be talking about nuclear disarmament in the style, I suppose, of the Global Catholic Climate Movement, which I've also participate with. In the Pray Study Act approach to yes, beautiful, thank you. I'd like us to start, I'll start by reading a prayer that was prepared by, if you could go back, prepared by the Northern California group of Pax Christi early this year, because this year is the 75th commemoration of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So they produced a beautiful prayer card. If we can go back to the second slide, that would be great. And with the artwork done by one of their members. and it's called the Prayer for Disarmament. Breath of us all, that is, preserve us from our own madness. Direct us away from dealing destruction to others, a path which leads to the ruin of ourselves and our world. Protect us. Help us to hear you. Jesus Christ, beloved, show us your precious face in all others, you in us and we in each other from all places. Teach us how to lower our defenses. Feed us love, which transcends fear. Heal us. Help us to let go of all fear. Holy Spirit, you call us in our minds, in our world, and through each other. Speak to us. Speak through us. When we worship power, control, money, when we cannot forgive or shove pain onto others, call us. Light the fire of love. We will not be afraid. We will not be afraid. Love transcends all fear. You are with us always. Amen. Thank you. This prayer is I was wanting to start with this prayer because so that we could center on some of the other prayerful voices that have taught us about nuclear power and nuclear weapons especially, and their evils. One of those people in the next slide is Father Richard McSorley, who wrote a brilliant article in Sojourners magazine in 1977 called "It's a Sin to Build Nuclear Weapons." And he really synthesized the problem by saying that the taproot of violence in our society today is our intent to use nuclear weapons. He further went on to say that the nuclear weapons of the communists may destroy our bodies, but our intent to use nuclear weapons destroys our souls. Now, I'm only repeating some of these quotes that I'll give you and these important prophetic messages because you may not have heard them. You've probably all heard from Pope Francis. And next slide, please. That you may not have seen some of what Pope Francis has done and said with respect to nuclear weapons. Last year, Pope Francis went to Nagasaki, and he used this photo of this little boy carrying on his back, strapped to his back, his dead baby brother, or it might have been sister. The boy is standing in front of a crematorium outside of somewhere within the destroyed, obliterated city of Nagasaki in 1945. Pope Francis used this image and post-made of it. When he made his presentation, those posters were everywhere with this image. He called it the fruits of war. Pope Francis also had postcards made of it with this image and sent it around at Christmas time last year to remind people that this is what nuclear weapons do to people. Now, next slide, please. You know that that Pope Francis has just released a new encyclical, Tutti Fratelli, or Fratelli Tutti. Of course, he meant to include us Sorelli. So brothers and sisters all. And we all are, just like Joan and Robin and Vincent were saying, we're all brothers and sisters in this world. And this is a group, this picture on the bottom of the screen a group of folks who assembled in New Mexico last year. And we learned about the Trinity test. The Trinity test was the first detonation of a nuclear weapon in the world. Many of the folks who were assembled last year for a conference in New Mexico were descendants of the people who lived at the time that the fallout blasted all over New Mexico, including where you see the map on the other side of the screen. The results of that were similar to what Robin and Vincent were talking about in terms of the effects of the chemical plants in Cancer Alley, the cancers, the multi-generational cancers, but most important, and back to that little boy holding on his back his dead sibling. Infant mortality skyrocketed after the Trinity test. So basically, American children, American babies were the first casualties of the nuclear weapons industry. So next slide, please. And as we were saying before, we're all connected, and these sacrifice zones are all over, including here in Appalachia, in an area that I call Atomic Appalachia. The photo of the playground, if you look to the left of the slide, you'll see a radiation symbol. That playground was in somebody's backyard. Little kids played on that playground. On the other side of that privacy fence, you'll see a concrete wall above the wood. There is some shielding, but above that, but anybody who knows, and our friend Vincent, who's a scientist, and most of you would also know, that radiation moves in all kinds of directions, including above a 7-foot tall concrete wall. So anyway, if the children were playing above in the top part of the playhouse, they would have been exposed directly to radiation that was spewing out of this company called Nuclear Fuel Services. So bottom line, this is war making continuing to be done at here in Appalachia, and we have an obligation, I believe, to work against nuclear weapons production, because it is war that is not healthy for children or other living things. Next slide, please. But also because it is what is called an economics and opportunity cost. The good folks from the Mary Knoll Office of Global Issues, Global Concerns, have put together the numbers. These nuclear weapons are extraordinarily expensive. They are disgustingly expensive, and I'm sorry if I'm using expressions that might offend someone. They are obscenely offensive. I mean, these are billions and billions of dollars that are being spent on weapons that should never be used. And they will go into the trillions of dollars because of a plan to so-called modernize the nuclear weapons complex. Now, a number of years ago, if you remember in 2015, when Pope Francis came to the States and gave us a speech before the joint session of Congress, he called out not specifically the nuclear weapons industry, but he called out the arms industry, and he said, that these are arms, it was money, all because of money, money drenched in blood. And that, I believe, that is the truth. That is the truth. It's all about money. Next slide, please. The international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons has also crunched the numbers for us, and then I thought that they produced quite a handy schematic there, showing us what could we have spent this money on if we had not spent it on nuclear weapons. $35 billion, just 1 year. We could have had 300,000 beds in the intensive care unit. We could have had 35,000 new ventilators. We could have paid 150,000 nurses. We could have paid 75,000 doctors with what we spend for nuclear weapons in 1 year. Next slide. Now, International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, they won a Nobel Prize, Peace Prize, for their work educating the world on the cost of nuclear weapons. Our friends in the Kings Bay Plowshares and in other Plowshares actions, they too work on educating the world on the dangers of nuclear weapons. They have gotten jail time instead of a Nobel Prize, but I believe they are some of the most noble, some of the bravest people I've ever known, and I just wanted to give a shout out to them, and want you to also do what you can to study the work of the Plowshares movement over the years on disarmament. Next slide, please.
Just want to acknowledge really quick, we are right at 7:30, so we are going to keep going. We would love for everyone to be able to stay, but we do understand if you have to hop off. So we're going to let Linda wrap up here. It's okay, Linda. We're going to keep going.
Okay.
Linda's going to wrap up, and then we're going to have time for questions. You're all right.
Okay. Well, let me just make the connection here between Appalachia and the work of the Kings Bay Plowshares. This on the photo and what was mentioned by Robin about that contamination being caught in a bowl, we here with Nuclear Fuel Services have the same situation. You see our mountains rising up above them, above those short smokestacks. The mountains also rise up on the other side and all around Nuclear Fuel Services, trapping the contaminants in, and these are radioactive toxins, chemical toxins. This company makes fuel for the nuclear navy, and it was without that fuel, those submarines cannot deploy the nuclear weapons at sea. So we will go down. Let's just go flip to the second to last slide, and we'll skip storytelling, which it would be fun, but I'm sorry about going too long.
You tell me when to stop, Linda.
Okay, keep going. We'll end it. Let's. All right, keep going. You can get this. We'll give you a copy of these
There we
slides.
go. We'll share
Keep
it
going.
with
Keep going. Keep going.
Okay.
Keep going. Keep going. When we keep going.
Oh, that's it.
Nope, you missed it. Okay.
This
Nope.
one?
But go back one, please. Yes. Here we are. Nope, go back one. We are the Catholic Committee of Appalachia, who has a brilliant motto to raise a prophetic voice. And so as we saw the connection between Appalachia and the Kings Bay Plowshares, I wanted you to know one thing that's really important. They are being, two of the Plowshares activists, one of them is still in prison, and that's Father Steve Kelly. Patrick O'Neill and he are both going to be sentenced on October 15. If you want, there is going to be a festival of hope to join, to celebrate them and to pray for them and to pray with them on October 11th. So if you can copy down that Zoom link, or if you're interested in finding out more about it, send us an email and we'll get you the information about joining in on this. Knowing these people is loving them, knowing their dedication is to know people who put their lives on the line to save the rest of us. One of the Kings Bay Plowshares is the granddaughter of servant of God, Dorothy Day, and that's the prayer for her. But the last slide I want you to end on a high note is from a priest who said, the priest who blessed the bombardiers who dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He said, and this is germane to the Catholic Committee of Appalachia, we must all become prophets. I mean that, he said. We must all do something for peace. We must stop this insanity of worshiping the gods of metal. We must take a stand against evil and idolatry. This is our destiny at the most critical time of human history. But it's also the greatest opportunity ever offered to any group of people in the history of our world to save our world from complete annihilation. So thank you. I'm sorry to go over, but then Vincent, I wanted to say that I heard you when you said that there was opportunity for advocacy, and this is the opportunity for advocacy that I think will that I feel having been called or that I work on. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Linda. All right, we should all be back here now, huh? Awesome. Well, to wrap up, we appreciate sharing that with us, Linda. To wrap up a little bit about nuclear disarmament and some of this stuff that Linda was mentioning, I did want to share with y'all just this link. This is to a video that was shared with me as well. Hold on, I'm going to find it for you guys. It's called The Creeping... Oh, wait, no. Yeah, it's called The Creeping Chernobyl. And this is a video in which Al Fritsch, who is a CCA member, and he interviews two of the chief plaintiffs of a recently filed federal lawsuit in Ohio. So I'm going to share this with y'all. After all, this is a learning workshop. So I'll share this if you have interest later. If anyone wants to look at that, you're welcome to.
Thanks.
But if anyone has any questions, I'm trying to see if we have any sent to us in the chat here. Any questions for our panelists?
I could ask a question of Joan.
Go for it.
Joan, in one of my slides, I put up an idea that I've talked with some people. I think Mikey Iafrate will recognize it. I put up Francis's encyclical. It's one of the more environmental ones, Querida Amazonia, if that's how you pronounce it. in which he looks at the larger global environmental problems as they're affecting this particular place and people in the Amazon, right? And the teachings that come out of that aren't just specific to that area. We can apply them to different areas. And I put up there Carita Appalachia, because I like to think that some of the lessons that come out of that encyclical are applicable to Appalachia. But I also recognize the first thing that you said in your talk, which was you and myself, and I think all of us, are living on stolen land. And one of the things that Francis talks about in that encyclical is the respect and dignity of indigenous people. So I'm curious what you have to say about those ideas of borrowing ideas and teachings that Francis wrote in this encyclical about the Amazon people, and kind of applying them in Appalachia, whether that's appropriate or inappropriate or in what ways. Does that make sense at all?
It probably does, but I can't say that I've read that encyclical, so I don't know if I can say if that is appropriate or applies.
Okay.
Sorry.
It sounds like a good parallel, though. I feel like it makes sense. We have a couple other questions here too. One from Sarah. Can any of the panelists answer? How do you battle the temptation for hopelessness and judgment of those who do not see the error of their motivations during your demanding ministries?
I'll say one thing. Well, I think because I realize how much I have been unaware of in my life, and then the privileges that I've had that have enabled me to see things more clearly, because I have been able to take time to do that, to study, to pray, reflect. I've met people in community that I can do that with. Not everybody has that. And not everybody, of course, grew up, in my situation. And I'm sure that there's many things I'm still unaware of. So we all have our unawarenesses. So we have to just remember that.
If I could, I felt bad after finishing. I realized, I didn't mention kind of how our work is going, and Robin can attest. We're actually doing really well right now in terms of some of the projects, specifically the cracker plants. The Brascombe, Wood County, Parkersburg cracker plant, it got canceled. I think that's pretty final. And we're like 4 years into stopping the PTTG cracker plastic plant in Belmont County, Ohio, right across from Moundsville, West Virginia. There's a lot of things that go into that, economics, COVID, but they cite environmental activists. So way to go, Robin, that's us, as some of the reasons why it's not coming. But I would say larger than that, when you're raising a prophetic voice, you're speaking truth, and that has consequences, and it might take time to play out. But inform yourself, and then trust the truth that's been given to us. So, for whatever that's worth, there are victories in these. Go ahead, Linda.
Go ahead, Linda.
Well, I like to remember something that Thomas Merton said, and this was said during the Vietnam War to a friend of his in a letter. He said, "Do not depend on the hope of results. When you are doing an apostolic work, you may have to face the fact that your work will be apparently worthless and even achieve no result at all, if not perhaps results opposite to what you expect. As you get used to this idea, you start more and more to concentrate not on the results, but on the value, the rightness, the truth of the work itself." So
good.
if we give ourselves if we take on this work, if our activism, if we believe it's valuable, it's right, and it's true, we are doing. Those are the benchmarks that Thomas Merton gave us, and the rest is in God's hand. He goes on to say.
Really quickly, Linda, while you're still talking, Joseph had a question here. What are the plowshare defendants charged with?
They're charged with breaking into the Trident nuclear submarine base in St. Mary's, Georgia, and they are with defacing government property, putting the security lives at risk. They're mostly felony charges and also a couple of misdemeanors.
Okay.
Like I said, most of them took bond, and but Father Kelly had parole violations, and so he was not eligible for bond.
Wow.
And so he has been in jail all this while.
Okay. Well, thank you.
So anyway,
real quickly, Robin, did you have one more point to share with us? We might wrap this up soon. All right, go ahead.
I was going to say that what gives me hope is meeting people like Vincent and some of the other folks that we work with in his community. Particularly, there's a faith group there, and they call themselves the Ohio Valley Interfaith Consortium. And this group of faith leaders is ecumenical, I think all Christian, although there might be a Unitarian presence there too, I'm not sure. But, you know, they are doing some amazing things in terms of raising awareness within their churches. And they have actually made contact with one of the corporate leaders of PTTG and are discussing what they call a community benefit agreement. And so I've been working with them to develop this Faith Leaders Letter campaign as a kind of boost to their activism. And well, I don't even know if they call it activism, but their networking and their advocacy efforts there. You know, they want to make sure that if this plan is going to be built, that it has the best benefits for the community possible. Ultimately, some of them hope it doesn't get built, you know, and that's, I think, what the end of the spectrum that I lean on. But, you know, it's a way of kind of walking that fine line between the hope that, you know, we can reverse this trend to industrializing the river and, you know, making sure the community benefits from whatever is going on. So that gives me some hope.
Awesome. Thank you, Robin. Well, thank you, everyone, again. We have a couple comments in the chat here, but I don't think we have any more questions. Yeah, and I sent everyone's contact at some point. It might have gotten lost in here, but of course, if you have more questions at any point, yeah, let's see. Oh, okay. Yeah, Michael said difficult to say, but without opposition, there would be no need for our witness. Those who oppose us are the vehicle for our call from God. Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for sharing that. Good perspective. Yeah, so it's 7:48, so I think we'll wrap it up. Thank you to all our panelists, especially, and thanks for everyone joining us. Have a good night.